Good morning, gentlemen, or afternoon, as the case may be. So this whole web video thing is going to go away in just a moment. I'm just going to kind of explain to you what my goal is for this reading that we are going to be doing while Miss Kelly is gone. It is called A Matter of Obedience. It builds on the reading that we did week before, I don't know. Police Battalion 101, when we learned about the group of German soldiers that killed this entire village of Jews during the Holocaust. They were commanded by Major Trapp. Ooh, that's annoying. And we had this big debate about whether you needed to hate someone to kill them, or if peer pressure was enough to do that, like this authority figure, like pie in the sky authority figure that exists that you want to please, or you don't want to be seen as cowardly, or morality is taken away because you don't have to claim responsibility for this if someone else tells you to do, you're just following orders, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what I want you to think about as we're reading this. Don't forget to circle any words that you don't know. Be highlighting and kind of trying to make connections to that Police Battalion 101. How come this isn't going down? There we go. That Police Battalion 101 reading. There are a bunch of questions. Ooh, went too far. At the end, further. I'm going to also provide a link in the video down below for the reading in case these get lost, so that can be printed out relatively quickly. I'm going to provide a link to a video that if you have time, you can watch at the end, that is about this kind of experiment that was done at Harvard. The connection questions down here at the bottom, which are on the last page of your booklet, kind of guide you through this. If you want to kind of, as the visiting teacher, group living staff, if you want to pause it, like if you want to read the questions beforehand and then pause it, periodically for students to, answer these questions. If you want to discuss while they answer the questions as well, because it's being read to you, you don't really have to do a whole lot of reading. That's fine as well. I don't have a problem with that. There are several students who may need help with their writing. Gammas, if you need to talk to anyone, you can. I'm giving you permission for that. If you need help with spelling, any of you can get that by asking group living or asking your partners. Both of my ELD classes are relatively well behaved. Some of us can get off task, but generally the work gets done. Don't forget, guys, that one of these assignments will be entered as a quiz grade, so you do want to do all the assignments. But ELD, there's a lot of discussion going on between the guys, so if they need to talk and they are behaving in a way that you feel like that's okay, I'm all right with them talking as long as you are. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started reading, and I'm really tired of looking at my face, so I'm going to get rid of the video. Yeah, all right, bye guys. Reading for A Matter of Obedience. 3 decades before Christopher Browning completed his study of Police Battalion 101, a psychologist at Yale University named Stanley Milgram also tried to better understand why so many individuals participated in the brutality and mass murder of the Holocaust. In the 1960s, Milgram conducted an experiment designed to see how far a person will proceed in a concrete and measurable situation in which he is ordered to inflict increasing pain on a protesting victim. Joseph Demow was one of these people who unknowingly took part in that experiment. In 2004, he described the experience. Like many others in the New Haven area, I answered an ad seeking subjects for an experiment and offering $5 paid in advance for travel and time. At the Yale facility, I met a man. in a white coat and horn-rimmed glasses. He led me into a room filled with an impressive display of electrical equipment. A second man was introduced to me as another subject for the experiment, and together we were told that the experiment was to test the widely held belief that the people learn by punishment. In this case, one of us would be a learner, and the other would be a teacher. The teacher would read a list of paired words, and then repeat the first word of the pair. If the learner did not respond with the correct second word, the teacher would deliver a mild electric shock to the learner as punishment. The professor said we would draw straws to see which one of us would be the learner. He offered the straws to another man, and then the man announced that he had drawn the short straw and would be the learner. The learner, said the professor, would be in an adjoining room, out of my sight and strapped to a chair so that his arms could not move. This is so that the learner could not jump around and damage the equipment or do harm to himself. I was to be seated in front of a console marked with lettering colored yellow for slight shock, 15 volts, up to purple for danger severe shock, 450 volts. These shocks would increase by 15-volt increments with each incorrect answer. In fact, the learner was an actor hired by Milgram. Demau, the teacher, was the person Milgram and his team were studying. Social scientist Nestor Russell and Robert Gregory explain how the experiment was set up. Once the experiment has started, the participant, the teacher, is soon required to deliver electric shocks in increasing intensity. In fact, no shocks at all are being administered, though the participant does not know this. As the shocks increase in intensity, the ostensible pain being experienced by the learner also becomes increasingly apparent by the way of shouts and protests, usually via tape recording, emanating from behind a partition that visually separates the teacher from the learner. For example, at 120 volts, the learner is heard to say, "Ugh, hey, this really hurts." Typically, the participants express their concern over the learner's well-being. Yet the experimenter continues to insist. The experiment requires that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on. Such commands were designed to generate feelings of tension, what Milgram calls strain, within the participant. If the participant continued to obey these strain-producing commands to the 270-volt level, the learner, in obvious agony, was heard to scream, "Let me out of here! Let me out of here! Let me out of here! Let me out of here! Do you hear? Let me out of here!" At the 300-volt level, the learner refuses to answer and instead responds with agonized screams. The experimenter commands the participant to treat further unanswered questions as incorrect, and accordingly to inflict the next level of shock. After a 330-volt shock has been administered, the learner suddenly falls silent. Excuse me. The participant is again ordered to treat any further unanswered questions as incorrect and continue to administer shocks of increasing voltage. Once the participant has administered 3 successive shocks of 450 volts, the experimenter stops the process. After a session of the experiment was complete, Milgram's team revealed to the participant that he or she had been deceived, and they brought the learner into the room so that participant could see that he had not been harmed. Regardless of this deception, in which the subject of an experiment is tricked into believing that he or she is harming another individual, is widely considered to be unethical today. At the time when Milgram described this experiment to a group of 39 psychiatrists, the psychiatrist predicted that one participant in 1,000 would continue until he or she delivered the most severe shock, 450 volts. In reality, 62.5% of participants did. By varying the setup of this experiment, Milgram observed a relationship between the distance separating the teacher and learner and the willingness of the teacher to generate more severe shocks. When the teacher was required to touch the learner by forcing the learner's hand onto the plate from which the shock was delivered, 30% of the teachers proceeded to the most severe shock. When the teacher did not touch the learner but remained in the same room, obedience to go all the way to increase to 40%. When the teachers were placed in a separate room from which they could hear the voice of the learner but did not see him, obedience increased to 62.5%. When the learner did not speak at all, but only banged on the wall to indicate distress, obedience raised to 65%. When the teacher could neither see nor hear the learner at all, obedience reached almost 100%. Milgram tested other variations in which the distance between the experimenter and the teacher changed. He found that the further the distance between the experimenter and the teacher, the less likely the teacher was to obey. Milgram concluded that the experiment forced the teacher to decide between two stressful situations, inflicting pain on another person and disobeying authority. The closeness of the learner and the experimenter to the teacher affected the teacher's voice. In obeying, the participants were mainly concerned about alleviating their own rather than the learner's stressful situation. In interpreting the implication of Milgram's research, many, including Milgram himself, focused on this effect of physical closeness between the perpetrator and the victim on the willingness of one person to harm another. Sociologist Zygmunt Bauman writes, "It is difficult to harm a person we touch. It is somewhat easier to inflict pain on a person we see only at a distance. It is still easier in the case of a person we only hear. It is quite easy to be cruel towards a person we neither see nor hear." But others who study Milgram's work argue that focusing primarily on physical distance leaves out other important factors suggested by the experiment. Russell and Gregory argue that the emotional distance is an equally important factor. In their analysis of the Milgram experiments, they write, "Although the learner was deliberately chosen as a likable middle-aged man, and although many participants expressed strong concern about his apparent plight and were relieved to be reconciled with him at the end of the experiment, he was a stranger to them." Milgram speculated that obedience rates may have been even higher had the learner been presented as a brutal criminal or pervert. But obedience rates may have also been lower overall had the learner been a loved member of the participant's family, a friend, or even an acquaintance. So Milgram confirmed that what most people instinctively know. It is far easier to maltreat others if they are personal strangers, even easier to do so if they are cultural strangers, and especially if we engage in the rationalization process of self-deception that serve to dehumanize him. This section is particularly important when we think about the Holocaust, right? So I want you to put a box. Let me see if I can bring my marks up. I want you to put a box around this quote, because we are going to be coming back to that as we are reading Elie Wiesel's story. Let me see if I can erase that now. Can I erase? Ooh. Wow, that takes a really long time. I won't be doing that in the future recordings. Sorry, guys. Next to that, what I want you to put in the margin, because we're going to be coming back to this article, I want you to put justification for, let's see if I can get this text box up. Justification for Holocaust equals, nope, that's a plus, equals cultural distance. Let's see if I can get this down here. Nope. Oh, there we go. No, didn't go. Distance and dehumanization. So you're going to be writing that in your margin, and I will give you just a few seconds to finish writing that while I erase this other stuff, or make an attempt to. The visiting teacher in the room can pause this if students need more time after I start reading again. When you are done, if you can give the group living staff a thumbs up. You're not going to let me delete that, are you? You're a dumb machine. Okay, so we are down here at Russell and Gregory. Let me move that over there. Russell and Gregory also believe that the way that harm is inflicted would affect the willingness of individuals to do it. In their analysis of the Milgram experiments, they point out that the shock generator was the technological and indirect way for the teacher to inflict pain. In most variations, teachers flicked a switch rather than using direct physical force. Russell and Gregory ask, how far would Milgram's participants have gone if they had been required personally to beat, bludgeon, or whip the learner, ultimately to the point of unconsciousness or beyond? Milgram's experiments provide insights that help us understand the choices and motivations of many who participated in the Nazi programs of persecution and mass murders. But many historians and social scientists who have studied the Holocaust say that Milgram's work does not fully explain the behaviors of the perpetrators of the Holocaust. While many acted in response to orders from authority figures, some perpetrators chose to go beyond the orders they were given. Others chose to act out their own hatred or for their own material gain without being asked to do so. Even within the German government and military, leaders and bureaucrats took initiative and devised creative methods to achieve larger goals, not in response to orders, but in an effort to work towards the Führer. So we have down here our connection questions. Sorry that I could not delete this yuckiness over here. Haven't quite figured out how to use this program quite effectively as I would like. So our first part, what encourages disobedience? So you're going to write one sentence on that. What does, according to Milgram, encourage individuals to hurt others out of obedience? The second question of that first question is going to be, what factors do the Milgram experiments suggest? That's going to be kind of that part on, distance and cultural distance, dehumanization, that whole section above that. What factors cause people to inflict pain and damage on others? What factors do these experiments leave out? So think back to the Police Battalion 101. Think back to, what those German army officers did, and how is that different than what Milgram's experiment is? Group living, if you want to pause this section so that they can kind of think about and write about that question, that's cool. I'm going to move on to question 2. How do the Milgram experiments explain aspects of perpetrators' actions in the Holocaust, and what do these experiments fail to explain? So think again back to Police Battalion 101. What did those people do that these experiments kind of don't explain those actions? That's that second question. What do the experiments fail to explain? The first part is, how do Milgram's experiments explain kind of the perpetrators' actions? Question 3, I think you guys can get on your own by reading. So I'm going to move down to question 4. What is the difference between physical distance and emotional distance? That is that box that we boxed around with the justification for the Holocaust. Emotional distance is very different than physical distance. You want to make sure that you address that. According to Russell and Gregory, what difference might the emotional distance between the teacher and learner make the willingness of the teacher to harm the learner? That's that next section after the box that we put around that one and then did this, thing that won't go away. Really be thinking about this right here. What might have created emotional distance between perpetrators and victims during the Holocaust? I want you to use the word anti-Semitism. I want you to talk about war and possibly, if you can, use the term partisan. If you don't know what partisan is, I suggest you ask somebody in your class. So sociology, question 5, if we haven't paused already so that students can kind of talk about that and think about that, we're going to move on to question 5. Sociologist Zygmunt Bauman writes, the most frightening news brought about by the Holocaust and by what we learned of its perpetrators was not the likelihood that this could be done to us, but the idea that we could do it. Do you agree that everyone has the potential to become a perpetrator? I want you to cite either something from Police Battalion 101, which you should still have that packet, or cite evidence from this article. I need you to justify and not just say, yeah, I think everyone has the potential to hurt others. Blah, 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 blah. Or I don't think everybody has because Miss Kelly is super awesome and she would never hurt anyone no matter what authority figure was there. I know this because Miss Kelly is awesome. That is illogical, even though it's true. What do the Milgram experiments suggest about the aspects of human behavior that can make it possible for us to willingly inflict pain on others? Do not just repeat yourself from earlier questions. Kind of think about what situations a person would be in, because those German soldiers, like some of them broke down and then had to drink vodka. Major Trapp didn't want to watch this horror happen. These people were normal people. They weren't monsters. So you really have to think about what would make it possible for somebody to hurt another person, and use evidence to do so. So 6 is going to be, pause if we need to. So 6 is some who played a role in the mass murder during the Holocaust later tried to explain their actions by saying that they were simply obeying orders of authority figures. Historian Daniel Goldhagen warns us this sort of blind obedience is not a sufficient explanation because it leaves out the extreme form of anti-Semitism that he believes motivated the German killers. He writes that individuals will only obey orders that are consistent with the values and morals that they already hold. So what does he mean by that? What is he suggesting about the morals and beliefs of perpetrators, such as the members of Police Battalion 101? And based on what you have learned so far, do you agree or disagree with Goldhagen? If you disagree with him, you can use evidence from this article. If you agree with him, you either have to use evidence from your own life, or evidence from Knight, or evidence from another book which you can cite. So don't just be like, I read a book and it said this, and so I think this. You need to give me, oops, sorry about that, guys. I hit the volume button. You need to give me specific citations, which means that you need to tell me what your source is. You can say, in my life, my mama did this. That is citing a source. You are your source. However, if you are citing a written or film source, you need to give me the name of that source and hopefully the author or be able to describe it enough to where I can go back and look it up. So this recording was 25 minutes. I would think that it would take you about 5 or 6 minutes, oopsie, to do each of these connection questions. If you have time, which if the guest teacher could check your work and make sure that you have multiple sentences for each question, because there are multiple questions for each sentence, excuse me. You can then watch the video on this experiment where it shows this experiment actually in action in interviews. Oops, this isn't even the right page. It interviews Milgram and some other people. It actually gets you to allows you to visualize it. Last question. Nope, that's it. I'm not going to add my own question. Have a beautiful day, boys, and work hard. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Bye.